Why hello there fellow duplicants, Rhadamant here. Thank you for tuning in to the first episode of a new series of Oxygen Not Included called Aquatic. If you would like to skip the game's overview or the details of this series, please use YouTube chapters. Oxygen Not Included is a space colony simulation game with a lot of engineering elements. Deep inside an alien space rock, your industrious crew will need to master science, overcome strange new life forms, and harness incredible space tech to survive, and possibly to thrive. The Aquatic Planet Pack, which is the DLC I'm currently playing, that one, adds new underwater biomes, new elements, aquaculture, and nautical elements to the game. And I've already created my world, but I'm playing and I'll just show you what it would be like if I was to create a new one, although I already have mine. It is the Aquatic Planet, and I don't have any story traits because all of these story traits correlate to different DLCs. And then in my already created game mode, I also have all the other DLC content packs off, which means biomes related to the other DLCs cannot and will not spawn. So let's load up the save I've already made and jump right into it. Right at the start here, it's important to note that I am playing the Marinea Asteroid, which is the Aquatic Planet Pack Asteroid, and it is Geoactive, Volcanic rich, and with metal rich. I'm on standard survival difficulty, with the only mod I'm running is MultiTemps, which just shows stuff in both Fahrenheit, Celsius, and Kelvin. All the story traits, as I just mentioned, are turned off, and only biomes related to the Aquatic Planet Pack or vanilla are turned on. So basically, I'm playing as if I don't own any of the other DLCs, so that if you play Oxygen Not Included and don't want to have to buy the other DLCs, you can essentially replicate this setup. A little disclaimer, I do not intend to use any canned solutions for colony building, and instead embrace aquatic solutions for our problems instead, which also means I don't want any input. No backseating or spoilers or anything like that. So before I start, let's cover the starting dupes. These were just randomized, but they're pretty ideal. We've got Avalka. Avalka does building, tidying, and digging. And she is a loud sleeper, so she's going to have to sleep apart from Rayvac and RCV. We've got Rayvac. Rayvac is a suit-wearing operating researcher who has critter aversion as a negative and is handy. Well, let's go back to Avalka. So Avalka is a loud sleeper who's innately stylish for a boost of decor and a destructive sticker bomber. Destructive being the mental break and sticker bombing being the mental boost. All right, back to Rayvac. Rayvac is also a sticker bomber. Has critter aversion, meaning very bad at ranching. Handy, which means pretty decent starting construction, but doesn't actually have a passion in it. And a binge eater when stressed. And then last but not least, RCV. Suit wearing, farming, ranching. You know, the man with a plan for the food. Allergies, so don't want to be around floral scent. Animal lover. Vomits when stressed, and streaker sparkle when happy. And when I say man, I probably don't mean man. All right. I am going to approach this as if the average viewer knows next to nothing about Oxygen Not Included. So that this is more approachable for the average person. So the first two things we need to figure out right at the start of the game is where to poop and where to sleep. Because you need to poop and you need to sleep, and that's how you play. So taking a look at the map at large, hitting left Alt S, we can kind of see the starting biome here. The starting biome has fresh water, so there's fresh water here, 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 and here. This fresh water is at the lowest physical point of all the fresh water, so this might be a good place for like an aquifer. And I'm pausing only because I'm doing a little bit of like brainstorming about colony building before we start. All the other water here is salt water. There's nothing necessarily wrong with salt water, but you can't really use it for plumbing. You can't really drink it. It has far more limited use than fresh water, which is used for plumbing and drinking and cooking, etc. Research, etc., etc. And of course, salt water needs to be desalinated if you intend to drink it. Meaning, the fresh water that we have on this map tile is precious, and we need to make sure to control it, to not waste it. Now, there is some difficulties with this this type of map, which is that water likes to leak by design. So things like sand and salt aren't necessarily watertight, and they don't make for good water barriers. So sand and salt will not keep water from eventually leaking out, which means like this water here is inherently unstable as is contained by salt. And any sand that locks in water will also fail at some point too. So one of the other problems or difficulties with the Aquatic Planet Pack is there is a lot of water everywhere. It's kind of nice because one of the advantages of water is it's dense and it's somewhat of a thermal battery, so that the temperatures are relatively stable, right? It's way more dense, obviously, than air. Which means if we take a look at the temperature overlay, it's a little bit warmer right where we spawn. I mean, I can't do anything about that. But generally speaking, if we open up the state change, like, things are kind of stable. With all this green, I'm going to start disappearing. The reason I mention that is temperature is not going to be an immediate constraint. So, thinking about immediate constraints before we get into this. Immediately, as I said, we're going to need a toilet and cots to sleep in. We don't even need cots to sleep in, but you kind of want a toilet. Because if you don't have a toilet, your dupes are just going to pee or poo, pee anywhere. And the problem is it's going to ruin our water really, really quickly. So that's like step number 1 to solve. But going forward, thinking about like the next 50 cycles or 50 days, oxygen generation in Aquatic Planet Pack is pretty interesting in that there are flue corals which produce a really good amount of oxygen here. 150 grams means that 2 of these flue corals produces enough oxygen for all 3 of our dupes. And they produce this as long as there as long as there's light present around them. So they're actually little oxygen generators, and it's glorious. And I said in the details that I plan to solve our colony problems using Aquatic Planet Pack solutions, which means I intend eventually to generate our oxygen with these flue corals. Now, one interesting thing about these flue corals is because they generate their oxygen in the water and it bubbles up, where the flue corals are active and lit, there's going to be immensely dense oxygen in those like air pockets. So oxygen won't be an immediate thing to solve for us, only because the map is generating oxygen like crazy through these flue corals. And all we really need to do is to tap the air bubbles to gain access to that. Now, we will generate we will generate carbon dioxide. So we won't need to really fix the oxygen problem. We have a bunch of oxalate here, and we have these flue corals that generate a lot of oxygen, but we outgas carbon dioxide. So we will need a means to get rid of carbon dioxide. And one thing you may notice is there's a little bit of algae in order to keep like oxygen production active a little bit. But generally speaking, you're going to need to filter it through a carbon skimmer, which means one of the first big challenges we're going to face as a colony is to try to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide buildup in this colony, because if it is not addressed within the first 100 cycles or so, we'll essentially have a colony half full of carbon dioxide. And you could try to like pump it, filter it, and dump it to space or something, but I think it's pretty reasonable given the abundance of water that's around us, as long as we get proper water filtering and sieves and stuff, to just carbon skim it. Some of the other problems that we're going to have is physically space is going to be an issue. I say that because we are surrounded on many sides by water. Water here, water here. One might assume there's water here and here. You know, there's kind of water everywhere. And as a result, it really limits the amount that we can physically build. So we're going to have really small very efficient builds. And then some of the other issues we're going to have immediately, which aren't big ones, is like food. So as far as farmables go, you have these mussel sprouts, which are sort of like your single-use edibles, right? You harvest it once, you're done, you just eat it. You've got the soda cane stalks, and the soda cane stalks are fed salt and produce like salty sticks. And you can farm those, but it will dehydrate you, and if you don't have like a water cooler for your duplicants, their athleticism takes a big hit. So that's probably going to be our like food. So thinking about like, you know, the water, the food, the oxygen, the waste, and the sleep, I've kind of talked about all of those things. So going back to that, what we want to do is plan out big future plans. I think having a water aquifer here at the lowest point of all of these individual puddles that we have is good. And then what we can try to do is to mine them out so that they like collect in here using gravity to our advantage rather than pumps. So with that said, one of the first things I want to do is to start mining. And I'm going to put all of this water here in these two tubes. In these two, like, puddles. I'm going to put all this water down here. Which also means I'm probably going to do my, my research around here. Because for research, you're going to want a lot of pumped water. So, current priority right now is build a latrine and cots. As far as priorities go, a Volca, I'll give you attacking for building, ranching, farming, research, operation. Whoops. And then anyone that has like any, oops, wow, I just keep misclicking. Anyone that has any additional skills to anything, everyone else will have a oh, wow, clicking is hard. Everyone else will have a reduction to that thing. For supplying and storing, I'm not going to worry about it too much. Because those are one of those things like everyone's going to end up doing. But there we go. Some basic starting priorities. Let's go with a little bit more. There we go. Okay. Now, about the latrine, talking about that real quick, I'm going to want a lot of horizontal space for it. My latrine eventually is going to want something like 2 toilets, 2 showers, 2 sinks, compost, maybe a water sieve, maybe water tanks. And there's not a lot of horizontal space here. So what I might think is maybe build a latrine over here, but as a complete stopgap, because trying to liberate this area to build a latrine, because this is kind of far from our starting location, I'll probably build a little outhouse very, very close to my starting spot. Cheers. And I think what I can do is my initial latrine is going to be simply a latrine. And then the bathroom, which will be like properly plumbed, will be over here. And that also is kind of near where I'm going to want to store my water. So that all kind of works well together, I would say. So we'll put an outhouse here. And then the other thing we're going to want is like a pitcher pump. And we're going to want a wash basin. So that we can clean our hands and keep food poisoning to a you know, under control. And the game is giving me warnings about no outhouse and no oxygen generation. I'm not worried about the oxygen generation yet. That's like a future worry. We also have over here a rubber gasket, rubber boots,
and a clothing rack which can be rummaged. The rubber boots prevent soggy feet and slippery floors. So that'd be good to wear to be able to not slip on slippery substances and surfaces. So I intend to head that way as well. So we're gonna tap this water, which is fresh water, potable water. And then for the boots, I'm gonna give these to a Valka, who is our builder and digger. She is way more likely to go places that need slip protection. And then in the clothing rack, we have swimwear. And I'm gonna give that. So this also prevents soggy feet and sopping wet effects. I'm going to give that to RCV, who as a rancher and a farmer is likely to be underwater more than others. All right. So the stopgap outhouse that I'm going to build here, very, very, very simple. Nothing here is going to be permanent. We're going to do a pitcher pump, and I'll just plop it here for now. In order to get water, we'll do a wash basin, and we'll do an outhouse. And I don't even really need to dig that spot. Works out. Alright, they are going to have some unreachable builds. So I need to give them away back to the regular zone here, so they're not stranded. Also, I'm going to break down the tattered beach chair and the clothing rack as well, and then dig up the mussel sprout. It'll be interesting to see how temporary those objects will be. Well, in the case of an outhouse, if I don't... So outhouses, the way they work is outhouses produce compost or poop that then needs to be composted. And then wash basins produce polluted water, which will then outgas as polluted oxygen. So if they aren't temporary, I suffer as a consequence, filling our base with polluted oxygen that carries disease risk. So it's absolutely something I'm going to want to, like, get rid of sooner or later. So, I mean, we'll see, but I don't plan on it sticking around very long. Alright, the other thing I wanted to do is cots. I'm going to put one cot here, one cot here, and one cot here. The one cot that's apart will be a Valka's cot who sleeps loudly, and then the other two can sleep there. And I'm enclosing it. And I'm enclosing it up here because of the benefit of a barracks. We'll get a +1 morale and additional stamina per cycle sleeping in a proper barracks. This water basin, wash basin, I'm going to direct it to wash your hands when you leave. And all these pneumatic doors are not to stop animals from getting through, so I'm just going to leave them open. They're just there to designate the room as a room. Alright. 2 colony achievements earned. We earned construct a building outside the initial starting biome and bed and bath, having at least 1 toilet in the colony and a bed for every duplicate. So this was outside of my starting biome here. This is like corals.
So, technically speaking, I've already done this priority of Latrine and Cots. The next thing I want to do is to get research started. And here, I'm going to have this be a sweep-only pitcher pump. So the pitcher pump here will help to load water into things like the wash basin. And then the bottle emptier will allow us to dump water that we have mopped up elsewhere back into the water pool. And this water pool is pretty vulnerable because if any dupe has an accident, that water gets polluted pretty quick. Given that it's like completely open to everywhere. It's not a good long-term spot, in other words. That's okay. And as you can see, we are intentionally draining water into this larger holding area, which will then eventually drain farther down. Now, in this case, I think it's not unreasonable for me to make preparations to unleash this water down here as well. So I'm going to excavate an area a little larger so that we can dump this water out too. And basically all of our water is going to be shifted downwards so that we can build up here without having to avoid water. And it's going to be a lot less to clean up doing it now than later. As far as research goes, we have a simple research station, which you could put in. So I'm going to drop the research station in here for now. Again, this very well might be temporary. With the pneumatic door. And some tiles like that. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? No, I guess that will work. And then your research station also requires power. So we'll set up a manual generator. And then run power to it. And yeah, I'm going to be setting this up weird. Because nothing I'm building right now will last very long. Alright, there we go. Outhouse is being used. And everyone's having a bit of a Nutria bar. So once you go potty, you're dirty, the wash basin will keep the germs from spreading elsewhere where we don't want it. So taking a look around, we've got the flue corals, which produce oxygen once illuminated. And the sand here is breaking between these two pressure barriers. So soon this flue coral will be flooded and alive. We do have beacons. So beacons are fish that produce light when they're happy and enjoy consuming oxygen. They eat phosphorite and starnacles, which are like these star barnacles, produce phosphorite when fed coquina, which is this sort of like crushed or condensed coral material. And then these guys produce light, which then can activate the flue corals. So there's a bit of like a 3-species feedback loop there that we'll take advantage of later on. Alright, cycle 1 report is ready. And this is just a synopsis of what happened today.
And I'm going to speed on higher speed through. So Avalka, this little like light box, is the distance of snores loudly. And it's not waking the other two. But if we take a look, this is a barracks with a morale bonus as a room, and this is a latrine with a morale bonus as a room. Alright, so the aim now is to try to get research going so that we can start to make progress on the research tree. And I'm going to start moving the water down as much as I'm able. So the manual generator will power the battery, and the battery will then power the research station. Another thing to note is, unlike previous versions of Oxygen Not Included, your people can swim. And swimming is, like, not super hard to do, so you don't need to provide, like, ladders underwater like you did before. Another feature is there's a back wall of a lot of stuff. So, like, this is salt back wall. Which means, like, this whole room is like a salt cavern. And I could mine it for salt if I wanted to. Okay, I'm gonna put these batteries in emergency only because Rayvac is running on a wheel and charging nothing right now, which is not great. First research. The first research I want to make is probably farm tiles. So I'm gonna get farm tiles up. And then mess table and the next project is start basic farming and build a great hall. Are there new ways to clean up water pollution in this DLC? Yes. There is a mutant version of a Pokeshell, which is a Sana shell, which are non-hostile critters that thrive in water, eliminate germs from any liquid they inhabit. It's not super easy to use the Sana shells for, like, water purification reasons. But we could move one to a polluted water source if we had some sort of accident. However, with that in mind, I am negating the risks of an accident in a big way right now by dumping all this water somewhere safer. Which I know this pitcher pump and bottle emptier will need to move eventually because it won't be tapped to anything. Well, we're about to get another deluge here in just a moment. And yes, there's a possibility it will, like, flood a building, but that's fine. Eventually, the water will find itself where we want it. All right, the research portal is a functional research decryptor with some basic stuff to find in there, and there's also a there's a note taped to an empty jar on the top shelf. So there's an entry about why there's a little mini fridge, and please stop stealing my Jello cups. I bought one for each day we're down here, and there's only 2 of us aboard, so it's not like I don't notice. Thanks. P.S. The blue ones aren't even Jello. Sounds like a threat to me. All right, and in this research portal, we gained how to make a title
turbine. A tidal turbine is something that you put on a, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. How to make gaskets and how to make mesh tiles. And here's the database entry in case of emergency. So let's talk about those things. Tidal springs are... what they do is they absorb water up to a maximum, and then they push it out, and then they absorb it and push it out. So they're like breathing water, if you will. So they're not producing, they're emitting. An aquatic spring that periodically spouts highly pressurized liquid drawn from its environment. Geysers and fumaroles emit elements at very variable intervals. They provide a sustainable source of material or kinetic energy, albeit in low volume. So what we could do is get a tidal turbine and stick it on there and harvest power from tidal force. And these tidal springs, as long as they're submerged in water, work. So like this one isn't working because it is not submerged. And I'm just breaking the mini fridge because why not? So the mini fridge yielded a rubber gasket. And then I think that's our second rubber gasket, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, we have 2 of them now. All right, research complete. Basic farming. So basic farming gives us the ability to do an algae terrarium, but there's not a lot of algae in this biome, so that's not super helpful. Planter boxes, ration boxes, and compost. Compost, however, would be useful. So I'm going to put a compost pile next to the outhouse in order to compost the stuff that comes out of the outhouse, but that's about the extent. So the purpose of a Great Hall is I intend to utilize soda canes as a food source. So here's the information about the soda canes. Soda canes produce salty sticks, which is a sodium-rich food that leaves duplicants feeling quite parched. They require salt to fertilize in a farm plot. They produce salty sticks, not a lot of food value in there, but for a little bit of salt, you get some kcals. It's a grizzly food source, but the parched means that we're going to want to replenish our liquids, which means I want a Great Hall. And I'm going to build a Great Hall with a water cooler in it so that we can replenish our water. So I'll also be getting a water cooler after I get the farm plots. And we'll do a Great Hall with a water cooler and then farming soda cane. And this is a stopgap measure to when we get better food production facilities, which are going to come later on as we tech up and get access to new materials. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm trying to like make more room in here and get rid of air pockets that are highly pressurized. Like there's 7.8 kilograms of oxygen stuck in this little pocket. And if we allow for a wider entryway and for the pockets to outgas, there'll be more room for liquid and less trapped gases. So there's like a lot of trapped gas there. Okay, at this point, we got mesh tiles, the algae terrarium, planter boxes, and the like. So there's a little pocket of algae here, which can be helpful in producing oxygen for us in the short run, but in the long run, we're going to need to really utilize more of the flue coral. And then our research station is going to run out of pitcher pump water source because the water level's almost too low. One thing I could do is, once they're done mopping, because I don't have any storage boxes anywhere else, I could do a sweep tool on everything, move all the water to the bottle emptier to dump where I want it, and then cancel all the sweep. Which is a quick and dirty way to get it done the way I want it. Okay, the research for basic farm tiles is done, which allows us to also build mess tables, which is required for the Great Hall. And then the other research that we wanted was the water cooler in the employment tab. And for that to happen, I guess I'll put mesh tiles here. For that to happen, we're going to need Rayvac to have access to more water. And by that measure, I'm going to need to... Oops, I accidentally broke the cable. To build a bridge, because he's kind of marooned at the moment. So there's all this bottled water that's like sitting around on the ground, and you can use that for research for now. Ooh, you know, oxyfern seed sounds pretty awesome to have really early on. So an oxyfern seed, for those that don't know, thrive in a carbon dioxide environment and are given water and dirt and produce oxygen out of carbon dioxide. So that's pretty useful. As a stopgap for before we get a carbon skimmer. So I like it. Super, super useful. So we have a large pool of water. And I think what I want to do is I'm going to set this build task at like a 1. And at a 1... I would like the entryway to this area to be secured. And by secured, I mean have there be a lip where liquids can't drip in here accidentally. So something like that. And then this tile here, once that's built, I'll fill that in too. Essentially, we're filling this whole thing in so it becomes our stable water storage that won't be polluted accidentally or anything like that. Which means maybe here we'll do a pitcher pump. Something weird like this. And obviously this only works when this is filled with water. So if the water levels go down, I can't replenish it as easily, I could just build another layer of floor in the bottom. Dupes always find a way to pee in the water supply. That they do. And what I'm doing here is I am putting mesh tiles periodically so that liquids and gases don't get trapped and can flow downwards, which helps to move carbon dioxide down. And when it's too wide, it allows two different types of gases to pass one another more easily. So knowing what I know now, about where everything is built. Let's build a... So I was planning on having my, like, bathroom here. So I'm going to build a farm here. Because I wanted to build, as you can see, get basic farming up and running. Now, if this is the floor level, let's adjust this accordingly. I should have done that ahead of time. So keep this the floor level. That will work. All right. You are stranded there. I'll fix that. Thank you for tuning in to Oxygen Not Included Aquatic, which originally streamed live on Twitch. If you have any questions for me, let me know in the comments below. I'm not, however, looking for feedback. If you would like to catch a live stream of mine, Rhadamant.com has my stream schedule and countdown timers to upcoming streams. If you'd like to join my online gaming community on Discord, Rhadamant.com has a link to it, as does the description of this video. Thank you so very much for watching. Special thank you to my Twitch subscribers, Patreon patrons, and viewers like you that support the channel and made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. I hope to catch you next episode or an upcoming stream. Farewell, my fellow duplicates.